When we took the trip to Germany, I came back and I told y'all that one of the things that startled our people was how brutally honest I was about the deficiencies of the reformers. First night in Berlin, in my lecture, I just lay out the reality that I know that the men, especially Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, would never have extended the right hand of fellowship to me. They probably would have had me minimally kicked out of the city. If not that, imprisoned. If not that, executed. And I know that. And I can still appreciate what God did with him. But I also recognize that when I read their writings, I'm going to encounter things that are going to trouble me. I was reminded about this. Oh yeah, I was going to do this. I didn't do it. I'm getting a bunch of people writing to me who obviously don't know we're on the air right now. So there's a bunch of stuff going on. So I'm not angry with them. I'm just saying, sorry guys, I can't exactly respond right now. We're a little busy. There was a certain individual who made some comments about Reformed Baptists recently. And one of the terms that he used was protest, Protestant. And I know it's been a couple years now, but I pointed out back then, and I'll point out again, people who go, well, you know, we are Protestants, and so it's our nature to protest. That's not where the term came from. When we don't know our own history, we end up saying really silly things. That's not where it came from. I can't tell you how many people I've heard say that. Where'd the term come from? There are things called diets, the diet of Worms, the first diet of Worms, the second diet of Worms, diet of Speyer. These were what we would call meetings of Congress, in essence. Meetings of leaders in the Holy Roman Empire who had power over certain areas, electors. And after the Reformation, there was a period of time when the non-Catholics gained sway, and then when the Catholics got power back. And so Charles, the emperor, once the Catholics get power back, he starts rolling back the freedoms that the non-Catholics had given themselves. And in the rules of the Holy Roman Empire, when the majority did something, the minority could file a protest, not a stand with a sign outside of Supreme Court protest, but it was a technical term in a legislative sense to try to protect rights of minority groups within the Diet. And that's where the term came from. The non-Catholics protested the majority action in the Diet of the Holy Roman Empire. It was a political thing. When I was young, I was honestly taught that on October 31st, 1517, there's a church service going on. It's a Roman Catholic church service. And Luther walked up to the door during the service and pounded the 95 Theses on the door, interrupting the service, and that those 95 Theses were all about how Rome was all wrong. And I guess I figured how Baptists were all right. Not knowing anything about church history as a young person. But that's the idea. No, that's not what happened. Not even close. As popular as it may be, as the pictures of him pointing to the 90, never happened. Never happened. And the term Protestant was a legal, judicial term that had to do with, as I recall, it was the Diet of Speyer. It might have been 1527, 1529. I forget which one it was. Didn't even bother looking it up. Look it up yourself. You'll see what I'm telling you is the historical fact. So there's all sorts of stuff about the Reformation. I was reading an article that a friend of mine posted this week, and it was about Zwingli and Bullinger. Now, who are Zwingli and Bullinger? Zwingli was the reformer in Zurich. Now, Zwingli was only a reformer for, even if you put him absolutely concurrently with Luther, he's probably just a little bit afterwards. He claimed he was earlier. But let's say 1518. When does he die? Dies at the Battle of Kappel in 1531. He does not have a long period of time. And so it's relatively simple to find stuff in his theology that we would go, yes, a reformer's theology. There's all sorts of stuff in Luther that most Reformed people would go, and of course, Lutheranism is Luther interpreted through Melanchthon and through centuries of interpretation after that. So there's all sorts of stuff you can find in Luther. But Zwingli held to a form of inclusivism. He did. Now we look at inclusivism today and we go, blah, 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 until we read Zwingli, who we respect, even though he drowned Anabaptists off the bridge there in Zurich. We have an exceptionally selective view of church history. We really do. And it's because of this that when people don't realize the breadth of theological expressions that have been given out there, you go back and you start reading people in history and you're just left going, if you think that what you're going to read is like picking up an R.C. Sproul book and it's going to be everything that I believe is going to be said by someone way back then, you're going to be in for a surprise. You're going to be in for a big surprise, which is why Sola Scriptura is so important. But it also helps provide a context for Sola Scriptura. Because while we do stand upon the shoulders of giants, we do not stand upon their shoulders by accepting every single thing that they said. What becomes clearer and clearer over time is the consistency of Scripture, not the consistency of human beings. And the only way for me to communicate all this is to do a massive study in church history and the theology that comes through that and the threads and everything else, and we would have no audience left at the end of all that, I can assure you.